Efraim Karsh is an Israeli-British historian, the founding director and emeritus professor of Middle East and Mediterranean Studies at King's College London. Since 2013, he serves as professor of political studies at Bar-Ilan University. He is also a principal research fellow at the Middle East Forum, a Philadelphia-based think tank. He is regarded as a vocal critic of the New Historians, a group of Israeli scholars who have questioned the conventional history of the Arab-Israeli conflict. Biography. Born and raised in Israel to Jewish immigrants to Palestine under the British Mandate, Karsh graduated in Arabic and Modern Middle East History from the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, and obtained an MA and PhD in International Relations from Tel Aviv University. After acquiring his first academic degree in Modern Middle Eastern History, he was a research analyst for the Israel Defense Forces, where he attained the rank of Major. Academic and media career. Karsh has held various academic posts at Harvard and Columbia Universities, the Sorbonne, the London School of Economics, Helsinki University, the International Institute for Strategic Studies in London, the Kennan Institute for Advanced Russian Studies in Washington, D.C., and the Jaffe Center for Strategic Studies at Tel Aviv University. In 1989 he joined King's College London, where he established the Middle East and Mediterranean Studies program, directing it for 16 years. He has published extensively on Middle Eastern affairs, Soviet foreign policy, and European neutrality, and is a founding editor of the scholarly journal Israel Affairs, and editor of the Middle East Quarterly. He is a regular media commentator, has appeared on all the main radio and television networks in the United Kingdom and the United States, and has contributed articles to leading newspapers, including the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Times, and the Daily Telegraph. Views. In his 2010 book Palestine Betrayed, followed by a 2011 editorial in Haaretz, Karsh articulated his belief that the tragedy befalling the Palestinian Arabs in 1948 was exclusively of their own making. Karsh argued that many Palestinians fled their homes as the result of pressure from a local Arab leaders, or the Arab Liberation Army that had entered Palestine prior to the end of the Mandate, whether out of military considerations or in order to prevent them from becoming citizens of the prospective Jewish state. Quote, he stated that there is an overwhelming and incontrovertible body of evidence to support his position, including intelligence briefs, captured Arab documents, press reports, personal testimonies, and memoirs. Karsh claims that the deliberate depopulation of Arab villages and the transformation into military strongholds began in December 1947. Praise and criticism. Hard Saka sees Karsh as the preeminent scholar spokesman of the revisionist movement in Zionism. Author David Rodman opined Karsh stitches together a seemingly irrefutable case for the validity of the traditionalist narrative, possibly bringing to an end once and for all the new historian phenomenon as a sustainable historiographical project. New Historians leader Benny Morris called Karsh's fabricating Israeli history a melange of distortions, half-truths, and plain lies that vividly demonstrates his profound ignorance of both the source material and the history of the Zionist-Arab conflict, titling his article undeserving of a reply. Morris adds that Karsh belabors minor points while ignoring the main pieces of evidence. Political scientist Ian Lustig commented that Karsh's writing in fabricating Israeli history was malevolent, and his analysis are erratic and sloppy. Yazid Sayai, professor of Middle East Studies, wrote that Karsh is simply not what he makes himself out to be, a trained historian. Karsh accused Sayai of a misleading misrepresentation of my scholarly background, and retorted that Sayai's remarks were not a scholarly debate on facts and theses but a character assassination couched in high pseudo-academic rhetoric. Empires of the Sand. Karsh's Empires of the Sand, The Struggle for Mastery in the Middle East, 1789–1922 was published in 1999, co-written by his wife Anari Routsi Karsh. Daniel Pipes called it a tour de force that offers a profoundly new understanding of a key issue in modern Middle Eastern history. Quote, Efraim and Anari Karsh review the relations between Europe and the Ottoman Empire in the final century and a half of the latter's existence, and in the process nearly reverse the standard historical interpretation. According to that interpretation, from about the time of the French Revolution until World War I, a dynamic, arrogant, imperial Europe imposed its will on a static, humiliated, supine East. This framework is common to nearly every leading historian, almost regardless of era or political disposition. Here is where the Karshes, a husband and wife team, step in. In Empires of the Sand, they characterize the standard account as fundamentally misconceived. Middle Easterners, they assert, were not hapless victims of predatory imperial powers but active participants in the restructuring of the region. Put more directly, 20th-century Middle Eastern history is essentially the culmination of long-standing indigenous trends, passions, and patterns of behavior rather than an externally imposed dictate. Great power influences, however potent, have played a secondary role, constituting neither the primary force behind the region's political development nor the main cause of its notorious volatility. Drawing on a wide range of original sources, and writing in a clearly organized fashion and in fast-paced prose, the Karshes make a very compelling case for the revisionist position, establishing it point by point and in elegant detail. Richard Bernstein characterized it as a readable, scholarly re-examination of a long and complicated Middle Eastern history. The main purpose of this very detailed and broad-shouldered history is to revise many of the standard interpretations that have been given to Middle Eastern history over the last 2 centuries. Most generally, the Karshes dispute the idea that the main events and developments in the region stem from the machinations of the great powers, especially Britain and France. The main impetus behind regional developments, they write, was the local actors. The authors write clearly and authoritatively and with great geographical sweep. Those who do not know much of these events will learn a great deal from this book, while specialists with views differing from the Karshes will face a robust challenge to their interpretations. Anthony B. Toth published a review of Karsh's Empires of the Sand in the Journal of Palestine Studies, in which he wrote, "This is a polemical book whose authors have extended the intemperate and unbalanced rhetoric customarily employed by dogmatic partisans of the Arab-Israeli conflict to the normally sedate and measured arena of 19th and early 20th century Ottoman history." The book relies mainly on Western published sources and official British documents, but the use of even these sources is limited, since they actually ignore most of 19th century history. Instead, the authors emphasize those episodes they feel support their interpretations. Richard Bulliet, professor of history at the Middle East Institute of Columbia University, wrote that Empires of the Sand is a tendentious and unreliable piece of scholarship that should have been vetted more thoroughly by the publisher, and asserts that the authors fail to contribute a dimension of sense and scholarship that raises the debate to a higher level. Karsh in response wondered what credential did Bulliet possess that a leading journal in the field should ask him to review our book. He is a medievalist who has done no research or writing on the subject, but in his spare time, he propagates the view of the Middle East and its nations as hapless victims of Western imperialism. Response from Karsh. Karsh states that his book has incurred the ire of the Arabist establishment, and that scathing indictments have been made, on the basis of hearsay, without writers taking the trouble to read the book. A leading academic has even urged fellow academics to place negative reviews on the website of a major internet bookstore, so as to warn potential readers of our book. Karsh argues that conventional view, absolving Middle Easterners and blaming the West, is academically unsound and morally reprehensible. It is academically unsound because the facts tell an altogether different story of modern Middle Eastern history, one that has consistently been suppressed because of its incongruity with the politically correct dogmas of the Arabist establishment, and it is morally reprehensible because denying the responsibility of individuals and societies for their actions is patronizing and in the worst tradition of the white man's burden approach, which has dismissed regional players as half-witted creatures, too dim to be accountable for their own fate. Little wonder therefore that Empires of the Sand was more favorably received by Middle Eastern intellectuals, fed up with being talked down to and open to real revisionism of the region's history after suffering decades of condescension from their paternalistic champions in the West. Islamic Imperialism. In 2006, Karsh published Islamic Imperialism, a history, stating that Islam started out as a great jihad that lasted over 1,000 years, and persisted in the Ottoman Empire right up through World War I, and is still alive today with the jihad against Israel, the 9/11 attack, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, etc. In his review of Islamic Imperialism, Emir Tahiri praised Karsh. Anyone interested in the debate about the place of Islam in the modern world should read this book. Karsh offers a new approach. He rejects the condescending approach of the apologists and the hateful passion of the Islamophobes. Instead, he presents Islam as a rival for Western civilization in what is, after all, a contest for shaping of mankind. Karsh does not hide whose side he is on in this contest. Muslim readers would respect him because, while he designates Islam as an adversary, he respects them. But Tahiri does criticize Karsh's take on Islamic philosophy, speaks of Islam's wholesale incorporation of Hellenistic culture and science, something that did not happen, and sees it as the genesis of Islamic politics and jurisprudence. He also states that Islam was attractive to people it conquered because in it ethnic and tribal origins counted for nothing, but 3 of the Prophet's immediate successors were his fathers-in-law while the 4th was his son-in-law. Robert Fulford said of Islamic imperialism, "Only a shrewd and talented revisionist, a professor with curiosity and nerve, could take on the clichés of Middle East scholarship and insist that they be reconsidered." That describes Efraim Karsh, a much-published and much-admired professor at the University of London. His new book deserves serious consideration by anyone who cares about this debate. Fulford also notes Karsh's criticism of Bernard Lewis's What Went Wrong. In the book, Bernard Lewis misses the point Karsh implies. The warlike stance of Islamists is not a riposte to Western imperialism. It's indigenous, deeply rooted in Muslim culture, and the most significant product of the Islamic belief that politics and religion are one. Karsh finds, in Islamic writing and practice, a profound impulse to expand Muslim power and eventually rule all countries. Robert Spencer said of Islamic Islamic Imperialism. The evidence he presents in this book of the continuity of the motives and goals of Islamic imperialists from Muhammad's state to our own should be sufficient to put paid to the simplistic and misleading notion that Islam is a religion of peace that has been hijacked by a tiny minority of violent extremists, and should leave, in the hands of policymakers of sufficient imagination and courage, to more realistic ways of dealing with this newly resurgent challenge. Palestine Betrayed. Karsh's 2010 book Palestine Betrayed is about the Nakba, the expulsion and dispossession of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians from their homes and land in 1948, according to Middle East scholar Daniel Pipes, with his customary in-depth archival research, in this case, relying on masses of recently declassified documents from the period of British rule and of the First Arab-Israeli War, 1917–49. Clear presentation and meticulous historical sensibility. Karsh argues the opposite case, that Palestinians decided their own destiny and bear near total responsibility for becoming refugees. In Karsh's words, far from being the hapless victims of a predatory Zionist assault, it was Palestinian Arab leaders who, from the early 1920s onward, and very much against the wishes of their own constituents, launched a relentless campaign to obliterate the Jewish national revival which culminated in the violent attempt to abort the UN partition resolution. There was nothing inevitable about the Palestinian-Jewish confrontation, let alone the Arab-Israeli conflict. Quote, according to Pipes, yet more counterintuitively, Karsh shows that his understanding was the conventional, indeed the undisputed interpretation in the late 1940s. Only with the passage of time did Palestinians and the Western supporters gradually rewrite the national narrative, thereby making Israel into the unique culprit, the one excoriated in the United Nations, university classrooms, and editorials. Karsh successfully makes his case by establishing two main points: that the Jewish Zionist-Israeli side perpetually sought to find a compromise, while the Palestinian Arab-Muslim side rejected nearly all deals, and Arab intransigence and violence caused the self-inflicted catastrophe. Published works. Books: Palestine Betrayed, read online. Islamic Imperialism, A History, read online. La Guerre d'Oslo, read online. Arafat's War, The Man and His Battle for Israeli Conquest, read online. Rethinking the Middle East, read online. The Arab-Israeli Conflict, The Palestine War 1948, republished under the new title The Arab-Israeli Conflict. The 1948 War, read online. The Iran-Iraq War, 1980–1988, read online. Empires of the Sand, The Struggle for Mastery in the Middle East, 1789–1922, read online. Fabricating Israeli History, The New Historians, read online. The Gulf Conflict 1990–1991, Diplomacy and War in the New World Order. Saddam Hussein, A Political Biography, read online. Soviet Policy Towards Syria Since 1970. Neutrality and Small States, The Soviet Union and Syria, The Assad Years. The Cautious Bear, Soviet Military Engagement in Middle East Wars in the Post-1967 Era. Articles. Arafat Lives, Commentary, January 2005, pp. 33–40. Reprinted in Ha'ama. Israel's Arabs v. Israel. Commentary, December 2003, pp. 21–27. What Occupation? Benny Morris and the Reign of Error. Benny Morris's Reign of Error, Revisited, a review essay on Morris's revised edition of his book on the Palestinian refugee exodus. Dear Diary, Wyan Cole's bad blog. Were the Palestinians expelled? Quote. European misreading of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Finnish Foreign Minister Tuomioja. A case study. The unbearable lightness of my critics. Beirut Bob. A review by Karsh of Robert Fisk's The Great War for Civilization. Interview. Sky News. Efraim Karsh debates 1948 with Ilan Pappy on Sky News.